Let me take you into a small clinic on the edge of town. You know the kind I'm talking about. Dim fluorescent lights buzzing above, faded posters curling at the edges, the smell of disinfectant mixed with something you can't quite name but wish you could forget. It was supposed to be just another ordinary afternoon. For Marcus Reed, that's exactly what he thought it would be. Quick checkup, in and out, nothing more. But that day, that ordinary moment, was about to carve a scar into his life so deep it would never quite heal. And yet, scars can do strange things, can't they? They can remind us of pain, yes, but they can also remind us of survival. Sometimes, they even remind us of power. This is the story of Marcus Reed. The day he walked into a clinic as just another patient. The day he walked out feeling smaller, humiliated, and invisible. And how, years later, he returned, not as a patient, not as a victim, but as the man who built an entire hospital. And the twist? He hired the very same doctors who once dismissed him. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind, shall we? Marcus wasn't just anyone. He wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but he wasn't born with nothing either. His mother, Lorraine, worked 2 jobs, one at the post office, another cleaning houses, just to keep the lights on. His father, Samuel, was a bus driver, the kind of man who wore pressed shirts to work even though his uniform didn't require it. Presentation matters, son, Samuel used to say. Even if they don't see you, you see yourself. And Marcus learned that lesson early. He was sharp, ambitious, the kind of kid who didn't just dream about being something, he planned for it. But life has a way of humbling even the sharpest planners. By the time he hit his late 20s, Marcus had already carved out a name for himself in the local business community. He was running a small but growing logistics company. Nothing fancy yet, but solid, reliable, profitable. He was on his way. And then came the day he needed help. Medical help, simple help. The kind every human being deserves without question. It was a Tuesday. Funny how the worst days often hide inside the most ordinary ones. Marcus had been having sharp pains in his chest for a few days. At first, he ignored them, work, deadlines, meetings. You know how it is. But that morning he couldn't. So, he drove to the nearest clinic. Not the big hospital across town. Too far. Too much traffic. Just the little walk-in clinic 5 blocks away. He walked in, checked his name at the front desk. The receptionist barely looked up. She shoved a clipboard at him like she was swatting a fly. No smile. No warmth. He sat down, filled out the forms, waited, and waited, and waited some more. Other patients came in after him. A young white man with a sprained wrist. A middle-aged woman complaining of migraines. Both were called back within minutes. But Marcus? He sat there. 30 minutes. 45. An hour. Finally, when he stood up to ask what was going on, the receptionist snapped. "Sir, sit down. We'll call you when it's your turn." It wasn't the words, you understand. It was the tone. The dismissal. The assumption that he didn't matter. And when he finally was called back, things only got worse. The doctor didn't introduce himself, didn't shake Marcus's hand, just glanced at the clipboard and muttered, "Chest pain? Probably stress." Marcus tried to explain. The pain wasn't just stress, it felt sharp, unusual. The doctor cut him off mid-sentence. "Look, you're young, you're fine. Maybe lose a little weight. Watch your diet. We'll run a quick test, but honestly, you're wasting time." Can you imagine that? Being in pain, being afraid, and the person trained to care for you treats you like an inconvenience. The nurse wasn't much better. She whispered something to the doctor Marcus couldn't quite hear, then laughed. Not loudly, but enough that Marcus knew he was the punchline. They ran a rushed EKG, barely explained the results, and sent him out with a slip of paper recommending over-the-counter antacids. That was it. No blood work. No scans. Just a pat on the back, and a door shut in his face. Marcus walked out of that clinic humiliated, angry, but most of all, afraid. Afraid because he still didn't know what was wrong with him. Afraid because he realized, maybe for the first time, how easily a system could erase you, how quickly you could become invisible. Not because you weren't speaking, but because nobody cared to listen. And as he got into his car, he muttered something under his breath. A promise. A vow. One day, he said, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I'll build something better. And when I do, they'll see me. They'll all see me. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, chest still aching, mind still replaying every dismissive glance, every careless word. You know how sometimes you replay an argument in your head and think of all the things you wish you'd said? That was Marcus. Why didn't I stand up for myself? Why didn't I demand better? Why did I let them make me feel so small? But anger without direction is just poison, and Marcus knew if he let it sit too long, it would eat him alive. So, the next morning, he decided to do something simple, get a second opinion. He drove across town to the big hospital. Long wait, crowded halls, but the difference was night and day. The doctor there listened, actually listened, ordered real tests, took his concerns seriously. The result? Acid reflux. Nothing deadly, nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that ignoring it could have caused lasting damage. Marcus walked out relieved, but relief was tangled with rage. Because it wasn't just about the diagnosis anymore. It was about how close he came to being ignored into silence. And that's when the vow he made in the car the day before started to sharpen. Here's the thing about Marcus. He wasn't the kind of man who let anger turn into bitterness. No, he was the kind of man who turned it into fuel. He started reading, researching, not just about medicine, but about healthcare systems, about how many other patients, especially black patients, had stories like his. The numbers were staggering. Study after study showed racial bias in healthcare. Black patients less likely to receive pain medication. Black women more likely to die in childbirth. Black men less likely to be taken seriously when they reported symptoms. Marcus saw himself in those statistics. He wasn't an exception. He was the rule. And that realization didn't depress him. It ignited him. What if there was a place where patients weren't invisible? A place where respect came first and diagnosis second? A place where no one ever had to feel what he felt that day in the clinic? The idea was ridiculous at first. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a billionaire. Who was he to dream of building a hospital? But every revolution starts with someone foolish enough to ask, why not me? Let's step back a bit. Marcus wasn't new to fighting uphill battles. In college, he was the kid professors underestimated until his name started topping the dean's list. In business, he was the young black entrepreneur who had to prove 10 times harder that his logistics company deserved contracts competitors got with a handshake. So when he thought about the clinic, it wasn't just about one bad experience. It was about every door he'd ever had slammed in his face. And Marcus? He wasn't in the business of staying outside locked doors. He was in the business of building his own. Still, there's a difference between dreaming and doing. Dreaming is easy. Doing requires sacrifice. And Marcus knew the road ahead would test him in ways that clinic never could. Here's what I want you to keep in mind as we move forward. At this point in the story, Marcus had no hospital, no blueprint, no investors, just anger, pain, and a fire in his chest that wouldn't die down. But if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been dismissed, ignored, or belittled when all you wanted was dignity, then you already understand why Marcus couldn't let it go. Because dignity isn't a luxury. It's not optional. It's not something you beg for. It's the bare minimum. And when you're denied the bare minimum, you have two choices: accept it or build something better. Marcus had already made his choice. The very next week, he started saving articles, printing research, making notes in a spiral-bound notebook. He even wrote on the cover in black marker, Project Horizon. Why Horizon? Because to him, it symbolized looking beyond what was right in front of him, beyond the pain, beyond the present, towards something bigger. At first, Project Horizon was just thoughts, ideas, what-ifs. What if there was a hospital where patients never felt invisible? What if doctors were trained to see the whole person, not just the symptoms? What if the waiting room wasn't a punishment, but a place of dignity? Those what-ifs started stacking up. And slowly, Marcus realized he wasn't just writing notes. He was writing a blueprint. Not yet a literal blueprint for a building, but a blueprint for a vision. A young man, dismissed and humiliated at a clinic. A vow whispered in anger. A notebook filled with what-ifs. He didn't have the money yet. He didn't have the connections yet. He didn't even know where to start. But you and I, we know where this is going. We know the man who walked out of that clinic with his head down is the same man who will one day walk into his own hospital with his head held high. The only question is, how? So there Marcus was, notebook in hand, fire in his chest, and an idea too big to ignore. Sounds powerful, right? But let me tell you a little secret about big dreams. They look shiny from far away, but up close, they're heavy, they're messy, they're confusing, and Marcus felt all of it. He'd never built a hospital before. He wasn't a doctor, wasn't a healthcare executive, didn't have a single friend in the medical field. What he had was anger turned into determination. And sometimes, that's enough to get you started. But starting is the easy part. The question was, how far was he willing to go? Marcus started sharing his idea with people he trusted. His best friend, Jerome. His sister, Alicia. Even a few business colleagues. Bro, Jerome laughed. A hospital? That's billions of dollars. You run a trucking company. Be realistic. Alicia was gentler, but no less doubtful. Marcus, I love that you're passionate. But hospitals are complicated. It's not like opening a corner store. Even his colleagues shook their heads. Man, healthcare is political. It's messy. You'll get eaten alive. And maybe they were right. Maybe they saw something he didn't. But here's the thing. Marcus had already felt invisible once in that clinic. He refused to feel invisible again, especially to his own dream. So he kept writing, kept planning, kept imagining, and the more people doubted him, the more determined he became. You would have laughed if you saw Marcus's apartment back then. Papers everywhere. Books stacked on the kitchen counter. Sticky notes covering the fridge. He studied everything. Hospital design, healthcare laws, patient care models, even the history of black-owned medical institutions. Some nights he fell asleep at the table with a highlighter still in his hand. Other nights he stayed up until dawn, chasing a single idea like a detective on a case. The man who had been dismissed as just another patient was slowly teaching himself to think like an architect of change. One day, Marcus set up a meeting with a local banker. He wanted to float the idea, see if there was even a chance of financial support down the line. The banker listened for 5 minutes, then leaned back in his chair. "A hospital?" he said, smirking. "Marcus, I admire your ambition, but you don't have the resources. Stick to what you know." Marcus walked out of that bank angry, but also strangely energized. Because here's the thing. Every no became fuel. Every doubt became proof that he was on to something bigger than anyone could see. And he kept reminding himself, "They laughed when I said I'd build a logistics company too. There's something I haven't told you yet." Marcus's mother, Lorraine, had always dreamed of being a nurse, but life, bills, and survival got in the way. She never had the chance. So when Marcus told her his idea, she didn't laugh. She didn't doubt. She looked him in the eyes and said, "Baby, if you build this, it won't just be for you. It'll be for people like me. For people who never got to walk those halls with respect." And that hit Marcus harder than any rejection ever could. Because suddenly, the dream wasn't just his. It was hers. It was theirs. He started small, volunteering at community health fairs, sitting in on local hospital board meetings whenever they were open to the public, networking with medical students. He didn't walk in pretending to know everything. He walked in asking questions, lots of them, and slowly, doors began to crack open. A retired doctor offered to mentor him. A nurse shared her experiences with bias in the system. A local nonprofit let him sit in on strategy sessions about healthcare equity. Piece by piece, Marcus was building knowledge. Piece by piece, Project Horizon was becoming less of a notebook fantasy and more of a roadmap. But here's the truth. Knowledge is powerful, yes. Passion is powerful too. But eventually, dreams need money. Real money. And Marcus was about to learn that when you chase a vision this big, money isn't just hard to find. It can become your biggest battlefield. Now, let's be honest. It's easy to cheer for Marcus when we look at the big picture. But in the moment, those nights were heavy. You ever chase a dream so big it feels like it's swallowing you whole? That was Marcus. He'd wake up at 3 in the morning with a voice in his head whispering, "Who do you think you are?" Bills still needed to be paid. His logistics company demanded attention. His employees depended on him. Some days he questioned everything. Maybe Jerome was right. Maybe Alicia was right. Maybe this was just a wild idea, a dream too big for a man like him. But then he'd remember the doctor's face in that clinic, that dismissive smirk, that lazy wave of the hand, and the doubt would harden into resolve. "No," he'd whisper to himself, "I belong in this fight." Marcus started spending more time in his community, not just attending health fairs, but talking to ordinary folks about their experiences. He met a grandmother who'd lost her husband because his heart condition was brushed off as just stress. He listened to a young mother whose complaints during pregnancy were ignored until it was almost too late. He sat with a teenager who said he was scared to go to the doctor at all because he felt nobody listened. Every story was a mirror of his own, and the more he listened, the clearer his vision became. This wasn't about ego. This wasn't even about revenge. This was about justice. One evening, after a long day of volunteering, Marcus met Dr. Harold Benson. Dr. Benson was retired, gray-haired, slow in his steps but sharp in his words. He'd been one of the first black doctors to run a practice in the city, back in the 70s. "Young man," Dr. Benson said, eyeing Marcus over his glasses, "you've got fire. Fire's good, but fire without structure? It burns down your house before it lights the world." From that day on, Dr. Benson became Marcus's mentor. He taught him about hospital politics, about medical boards, about the grueling red tape that strangled most good intentions. "Healthcare isn't just about medicine," Benson told him. "It's about money, power, and perception. Learn to navigate those three, and maybe you'll get somewhere." Marcus soaked it all up like a sponge. Armed with his research and a bit of guidance, Marcus decided to make his first real pitch. Not for billions, just a modest start. He gathered a group of small investors, mostly local business leaders he knew from his logistics work. Over coffee and pie at a diner, he laid out his vision. A community-centered clinic that could one day expand into a hospital. He spoke from the heart, painting a picture of dignity, respect, and equity. He didn't sugarcoat the challenges. He just told the truth. When he finished, there was silence. The kind of silence that weighs heavy. Then one investor cleared his throat and said, "Marcus, it's a beautiful dream, but dreams don't pay dividends." And just like that, they walked away. That night, Marcus almost gave up. He sat at his desk, staring at the words Project Horizon written on his notebook, and felt foolish. Maybe he was wasting his time. Maybe the world didn't want change. Maybe people preferred the broken system because it was familiar. He closed the notebook, put it in a drawer, walked away. For 3 days, he didn't touch it, didn't write, didn't dream. But on the 4th day, something happened. Marcus's mother called. "Baby," she said, "I went to the doctor this week. You know what happened? They brushed me off. Again, same story you went through. I walked out of there so angry I cried in the car. And you know what I thought about while I was crying?" "What?" Marcus asked quietly. "I thought about your hospital, the one you keep talking about. The one everybody says is impossible. Baby, I need you to build it. Not just for me, for everyone." And just like that, the fire roared back to life. He opened the notebook again. This time, he didn't just write ideas. He wrote timelines, milestones, action steps. The dream had become a plan. 2 months later, Marcus got his first real win. A non-profit organization focused on healthcare equity invited him to present his vision at a community forum. He walked in nervous, hands sweating, heart pounding. But when he spoke, something happened. The audience leaned in. They nodded. They clapped. Some even stood up. Afterward, a local councilwoman approached him. "Mr. Reed," she said, "you've got something here. Come see me. Let's talk about making this real." For the first time, Marcus felt the wind at his back. But here's the thing about momentum. Once you have it, the stakes get higher. Marcus was stepping into rooms he'd never been in before, talking to people who measured success in millions, not thousands. Every meeting was a test. Every handshake was a gamble. And soon, he'd discover that the fight for money wasn't just about numbers on a page. It was about power, prejudice, and politics. The kind of fight that could break him or make him unstoppable. If vision is the spark, money is the fuel. Without it, even the brightest fire dies in the dark. Marcus had the spark. He had the story. He even had people listening. But now, he needed something far more difficult to secure: funding. And if you've ever tried to raise money for a dream that challenges the status quo, you know this. The world doesn't hand you a blank check just because your cause is noble. No, the world makes you prove yourself again and again, until you're exhausted, doubting, and ready to break. Marcus's first big investor meeting was in a sleek glass tower downtown. The kind of building where the lobby smelled faintly of money and polished marble. He wore his best suit, not new, but clean and sharp. He rehearsed his pitch in the elevator, repeating the words like a prayer. The boardroom was a different planet. Polished wood table, leather chairs, suits worth more than his car. The men and women sitting there didn't look like people. They looked like gatekeepers. "Mr. Reed," one of them said, extending a hand, "we've read your proposal. Interesting idea. Let's hear it." Marcus nodded, swallowed his nerves, and began. He spoke about dignity in healthcare, about equity, about building a hospital that would treat people as human beings, not as numbers on a chart. He painted the picture vividly, his voice steady, his hands moving with conviction. When he finished, the room was silent. Then one man leaned back and said, "It's an admirable vision. But tell me, Mr. Reed, what's the profit model?" Marcus hesitated. "The profit model?" "Yes," the man said smoothly. "Hospitals are businesses. Investors want returns. How do you plan to make money?" Marcus explained: patient-centered care, community partnerships, long-term sustainability. But the more he spoke, the more their expressions hardened. Finally, another voice cut through. This is charity, not business. And charity doesn't pay. The meeting ended with polite smiles and firm handshakes. But Marcus knew. He'd been dismissed. Not all rejections were polite, though. At another meeting, a wealthy investor studied Marcus for a long moment before saying, "Son, it's a noble dream. But let's be real. You expect us to believe a black man with no medical degree is going to build a hospital? Come on, don't embarrass yourself." Marcus froze. He'd expected skepticism, but the blunt prejudice hit like a punch to the gut. He wanted to shout, to slam his fist on the table, to demand respect. But instead, he simply gathered his papers, thanked them for their time, and walked out. Outside, he stood on the sidewalk, staring at the traffic lights blinking red, green, red. For a moment, he wondered if they were right. Maybe the world wasn't ready to see a man like him at the helm of something this big. But then, a quiet fire sparked in his chest. No, that's exactly why I have to do it. Not every door slammed shut. Some cracked open, even if just a little. One evening, after another grueling pitch, Marcus stayed behind in the conference room, gathering his notes. A woman from the panel lingered. "You've got guts," she said, her tone softer than during the meeting. "They'll never admit it, but most of these guys don't care about communities. They care about margins." Marcus sighed. "So what do I do? Find people who care about both. They exist. Doctors, philanthropists, even a few investors who understand that doing good can also do well. You just have to dig harder." Her words stuck with him. That night, Marcus scribbled in his notebook, "Not all money is good money. Find the right money." Weeks turned into months. Rejections piled up. But Marcus refused to quit. Then a break came. A regional health foundation announced a grant competition for innovative solutions to address healthcare inequities. The prize? $500,000. Marcus almost didn't apply. The competition was fierce, and the application was grueling. But Alicia, ever his rock, said, "Marcus, this is it. This is your shot. Write it like your life depends on it." And so he did. He poured his heart into that application. He wrote about his mother, about the clinic, about the vision of a hospital that would stand as a beacon of hope. Months later, the phone rang. "Mr. Reed? Congratulations. You've been awarded the grant." Marcus dropped the phone. Literally dropped it. Then he shouted so loud his neighbors banged on the wall. For the first time, he had not just a dream, but funding. But here's the thing about success. It attracts attention, and not all of it is good. When word spread that Marcus had secured the grant, some people smiled to his face but grumbled behind his back. Competitors scoffed. Critics whispered. Even some community leaders said, "Let's see how long he lasts." And the doctors at the very clinic that had mistreated him? They heard too. One of them even muttered at a conference, "He'll burn out. Watch." Marcus didn't reply. He just tucked those words into his memory, saving them like fuel for the fire. Because now, with money in hand, the real building was about to begin. $500,000 sounded like a fortune on paper. But in the world of hospitals, it was a drop in the ocean. Marcus knew this. He didn't waste a second pretending otherwise. Instead of trying to buy buildings or hire staff, he used the money strategically. Research, feasibility studies, and partnerships. The first brick in his hospital wasn't concrete. It was credibility. He hired a consulting firm with experience in healthcare planning. He paid for a respected architect to sketch designs. He even brought in a retired hospital administrator to validate the numbers. It wasn't flashy, but it was smart, because when Marcus walked into his next round of meetings, he didn't just have passion. He had blueprints. He had data. He had professionals backing his vision. And suddenly, people started listening differently. Momentum grew faster than he expected. A local journalist caught wind of Marcus's project and asked for an interview. Marcus hesitated. Publicity was a double-edged sword. But eventually he agreed. The article ran on the front page of the city paper. Local entrepreneur plans hospital to bridge healthcare divide. The story painted Marcus as a visionary. It talked about his background, his mother's struggles, his personal experience of mistreatment, and his unrelenting pursuit of justice. And then it happened. His phone lit up. Messages from strangers, emails from supporters, volunteers asking how they could help, but also critics, angry letters, online comments sneering. This will never work. Who does this guy think he is? Marcus read every word, and instead of feeling crushed, he smiled. Because finally, people were talking. Soon, politics entered the picture. The councilwoman who'd encouraged him months earlier invited him to City Hall. She was supportive but blunt. Marcus, you've got something big here. But listen to me carefully. Hospitals are political beasts. Zoning laws, permits, funding approvals. Nothing moves without allies. You'll need friends in high places. And enemies will try to stop you. Marcus nodded. I'm ready. She smiled wryly. You think you're ready? We'll see. From that moment, Marcus stepped into a new world. Networking dinners, fundraising galas, shaking hands with people who smiled wide, but whose eyes measured every move. He hated the game, but he played it, because he understood something vital. Passion builds vision, but politics builds walls. And if he wanted to break through, he had to learn how to climb. Remember those doctors at the old clinic? The ones who brushed him off? They were watching, and they weren't pleased. At a medical association meeting, one of them scoffed loudly. This is a circus. A businessman thinks he can build a hospital? Absurd. He's going to fail, and people will get hurt. Another chimed in. We need to stop this before he wastes more money. Word got back to Marcus. At first it stung, but then it fueled him. He told Alicia that night. One day, those same doctors will be applying for jobs at my hospital, and I'll decide if they even get an interview. She smiled knowingly. Then build it fast, because right now, they're betting against you. It wasn't just outsiders who doubted him. Even within his community, there was skepticism. Some folks said, Marcus means well, but let's be real, they'll never let him pull this off. Others whispered, sounds like a scam. Another big talker with no results. It hurt. These were his people, the very people he wanted to serve. But Marcus didn't lash out. He understood. When people have been failed for generations, hope is dangerous. It's safer to doubt than to believe and be disappointed. So Marcus kept building quietly, letting actions speak louder than promises. And then came the twist. A rival developer, wealthy, connected, and very white, announced plans to build a state-of-the-art hospital on the other side of town. On paper, it looked generous, but everyone knew the truth. This was about profit. It was about control. And it was about crushing Marcus before he even got started. Suddenly, Marcus wasn't just chasing a dream. He was in a race, and the clock was ticking. To fight back, Marcus organized a fundraising gala. It was the boldest move he'd made so far. A hotel ballroom, live music, dinner, speeches. Tickets weren't cheap, but they sold out. The night of the gala, Marcus stood backstage, heart pounding. He'd never done anything like this before. When he stepped up to the podium, the room hushed. He didn't talk numbers. He didn't drown them in jargon. He told his story. The clinic, his mother, the grant, the dream. By the end, people were wiping tears from their eyes. And when the donation cards were tallied, the total stunned him. Over $1 million raised in one night. Marcus walked off stage trembling, not from fear, from possibility. But here's the truth. For every million raised, 10 million more were needed. For every door opened, 2 slammed shut. And Marcus was about to learn the hardest lesson yet. That in the world of hospitals, money wasn't the only thing standing in his way. It was power. Old power. Power that didn't want to share space with men like him. And that battle was only beginning. The city council chambers were packed. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras ready. On the agenda that night, 2 competing proposals for new hospitals. One was Marcus's vision, a community-centered, equity-driven facility built with dignity at its core. The other belonged to the rival developer, sleek, profit-focused, backed by deep-pocketed investors and seasoned lobbyists. When Marcus stepped up to speak, the room buzzed. Some eyes held respect. Others thinly veiled doubt. He gripped the podium and began. Good evening. My name is Marcus Reed. I stand before you not as a doctor, not as a politician, but as a man who knows what it feels like to be dismissed when you're at your most vulnerable. I know what it feels like to be treated as less than human in a place that should heal. And I refuse to let that story define healthcare in this city any longer. Gasps, murmurs, pens scribbling furiously across notepads. He laid out his plan with clarity. Not just statistics, but heart. He spoke about jobs, training programs, outreach clinics. He painted a vision not just of a hospital, but of a movement. And when he finished, the applause shook the chamber. But then, the rival developer rose. Polished, charming, calculated. Mr. Reed's story is touching, he began smoothly. But healthcare is not built on sentiment. It's built on expertise, efficiency, and capital. My partners and I have decades of experience in hospital management. We can deliver results quickly, without the risks of an inexperienced dreamer experimenting on our city. The room shifted. Some nodded, others frowned. And Marcus realized, in that moment, that this fight would not be won with applause alone. The council didn't decide that night. They tabled the discussion, citing the need for further review. Outside, reporters swarmed Marcus. Microphones shoved in his face. Mr. Reed, how do you respond to critics who say you're underqualified? Do you really think you can outpace a developer with 10 times your funding? Isn't this personal vendetta clouding your judgment? Marcus kept his composure. This isn't about me. This is about the people who deserve care. And I will not stop until they get it. But inside, he was shaken. Back at home, Alicia found him sitting in the dark, staring at his hands. They don't want me to win, he whispered. Not really. The system wasn't built for someone like me to succeed. She sat beside him, took his hand. You're right. It wasn't. Which is exactly why you have to keep going. Her words steadied him. But the truth remained. He was in uncharted waters, facing opponents who had power he couldn't match dollar for dollar. If he was going to win, he'd have to fight smarter. Up until now, Marcus had leaned heavily on passion and storytelling. But he realized he needed more than inspiration. He needed ironclad strategy. So he assembled a team. Not just consultants, but warriors. A former hospital CEO who knew the tricks developers used to cut corners. A young black attorney, sharp as a blade, who specialized in healthcare law. A communications expert skilled at flipping negative press into rallying cries. Together, they built a war room. Every morning at 6 a.m., they gathered around Marcus's dining table, laptops open, coffee steaming, papers everywhere. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was war.as. Marcus gained traction. Whispers began to spread. Anonymous calls to journalists questioning his finances. Social media posts claiming his hospital was a scam. Flyers slipped under doors with bold black letters. Would you trust this man with your healthcare? It was ugly. Racist undertones dripping from every word. Marcus was furious, but his team urged caution. This is classic. They want to rattle you. Don't take the bait. We'll counter it with facts, with transparency, with truth. So Marcus opened his books, invited auditors, made his finances public. And slowly, the smear campaign backfired. People saw the attacks for what they were. Desperation point one morning. Marcus opened his mailbox and found an envelope. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. Mr. Reed, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to thank you. My husband died last year because the nearest hospital turned him away. I've been following your fight, and for the first time in years, I feel hope. Please don't give up. We need you. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, the letter trembling in his hands. Tears blurred the ink. He folded the note carefully, placed it in his notebook, and whispered, I won't give up. Not now. Not ever. But hope alone wouldn't build walls or hire doctors. Money, politics, and prejudice still loomed like giants in his path. And as the rival developer doubled down, pulling strings behind the scenes, Marcus realized the next battle would be the hardest yet. Securing land. Because without land, a hospital is just a dream on paper. And the land he wanted? The city had plans for it. Plans that didn't include him. Every hospital needs land. Not just any plot, but the right one. Location meant accessibility, visibility, and trust. Marcus had his eyes on a vacant lot in the heart of the city, not far from the clinic where he'd once been dismissed. The symbolism was perfect. A new beginning where the old system had failed. But there was a problem. The city owned the land, and the council had already earmarked it for commercial development. In plain language, retail stores, luxury apartments, anything but a hospital for the underserved. When Marcus submitted his proposal to repurpose the land, the response was swift, denied. But Marcus wasn't about to walk away. A month later, Marcus filed an appeal. That appeal led to a public hearing. The hearing was packed. Community members squeezed into rows of folding chairs. Reporters filled the aisles. At the front, a row of stern-faced council members shuffled papers, barely looking up. Marcus approached the microphone. Council members, he began. This land has stood empty for years. You can turn it into another shopping center. Or you can turn it into hope. You can let it be a place where lives are saved instead of wallets drained. He paused, scanning the crowd. This isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's about dignity, about justice, about who gets to live and who gets left behind. The room erupted in applause. But when the rival developer took the stand, his voice was calm, smooth, surgical. Mr. Reed speaks with passion, he said. But passion does not build hospitals. It does not secure operating budgets. It does not ensure safety or sustainability. My proposal creates jobs, tax revenue, and guaranteed results. His proposal? A gamble. The council shifted uncomfortably, and Marcus knew he was losing them. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, community members stood up. A mother raised her hand. My baby almost died last year because we couldn't get care in time. We need this hospital. An elderly man leaned on his cane. I've lived here 50 years. We've got grocery stores. We've got gas stations. We don't need more of that. We need healthcare. A nurse in scrubs shouted from the back. I'll volunteer my time if it means this hospital gets built. The council tried to quiet the crowd, but the momentum was unstoppable. Voices rose, fists pumped, chants filled the chamber. We need this. We need this. We need this. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. For the first time, the dream wasn't just his. It belonged to everyone in that room. But politics is rarely moved by passion alone. Despite the public outcry, the council voted. 4 against, 3 in favor. The land would remain slated for commercial use. Marcus's proposal was denied. The room exploded in anger. Shouts, protests, tears. Reporters scribbled furiously as security tried to control the chaos. And Marcus? He stood frozen. All the late nights, the strategy meetings, the speeches, the momentum, and still, the system said no. For the first time in months, Marcus felt truly defeated. That night, Marcus sat alone in his office. The lights dim, the city glowing faintly through the window. His notebook lay open, but he couldn't write a word. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Reed?" a voice said. "You don't know me. My name is Evelyn Carter. I own property. A big property. And I've been following your story." Marcus sat up. "Go on." "I watched that council meeting tonight. Disgraceful. They don't want change, but I do. I have land. More than enough for your hospital. Let's talk." Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "Are you serious?" "As serious as a heart attack," she said. "Meet me tomorrow morning." Marcus hung up and leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. Was this real? Or another setup? He didn't know. But he did know one thing. Sometimes, when doors slam shut, a window cracks open. And if Evelyn Carter was who she claimed to be, that window might just lead to the foundation of his dream. But new allies come with new costs. And Marcus was about to discover that not every gift is free.